I'm Charlie Atlas. I'm a video artist and a filmmaker and have been doing this work since the early 70s. And I'm based in New York, but since I've met Michael Clark, I spent a lot of time in London. I've been doing the lighting for Michael's work since 1984 or 85 maybe. I've collaborated with a lot of different choreographers, most notably Merce Cunningham for many years. And now my work is mostly installation in museums and galleries and on a large scale. The context for Hail the New Puritan, it was originally, I approached Channel 4, which had just begun broadcasting in 1982, I believe. So it was the early days. I think I first approached them in 1984, and I think the film was shot in 1984, 85. This was in the middle of Margaret Thatcher's England, and it was at the moment that I started filming was also, it was height of unemployment in England. That was the context. But my focus was really Michael Clark and his group of collaborators and friends. And I had met Michael earlier through Carol Armitage. I was in awe of him as a dancer, and he was amazing to watch. And so that was my main motivation in wanting to make a film with him. The original proposal was a half-hour video dance based on Narcissus and Echo, which was a theme that he had worked on in one of the choreographies he'd done. And by the time we got this proposal and raised the money and talked to Channel 4, it was commissioned as an hour-long arts documentary about Michael Clark. The scene in London was very different from New York. This was before the British art scene had sort of exploded. It was kind of a kind of depressed country, actually. It's the way I saw. Not the underground was very lively, but in general, the context was depressed. The commission, what they really wanted was for me to explain Michael's work. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that was a good way of approaching it. I thought if I showed the context of the work, that would be enough explanation. So that's what I intended to do, to show Michael and his choreography in the context of London and his group of friends. In the rough cut, Hail the New Puritan, the scene in Lee Bowery's apartment was about twice as long. And I hated to cut it. I wish I had the outtakes because they're really hilarious. And I still had to argue with the commissioning editor, Michael Cousteau. He was like, the film stops at that point and it doesn't continue. I remember saying to him, well, if you're at a party and you encounter someone really interesting, you maybe spend more time with them than you do with some of the other people. And also, the sex scene was very much more explicit than I knew I would have to cut that, but I just wanted to put that in the rough cut just so he would have to tell me to cut it. Because We Must, the Venus in Furs scene, at that time, the state of video was such, I was editing it in Ireland, in Dublin. I had to work in the middle of the night and have 10 video recorder playback machines, 1 inch, all running at once. Nowadays, you could do it all on a computer, but in those days, this is what it took. So it was I had to build it up layer by layer. As I sometimes say about my collaborations, it's really based on love. Michael became a really close friend, and we had a lot of adventures together. Before I even did this film, I did lighting and I did costumes for some of the early work before Lee Bowery. I sort of gave over to Lee because I thought he was better at it than me. I've continued to work with Michael over the years because I love his work. He trusts me to do the best I can, helping him to realize his vision. And it's worked for many, it started in 1984 and it's continued till now. So that's like 35 years. The way I structured the editing and the presentation of the installation was first becoming aware of the space that it was going to be shown in, the Barbican space downstairs. And according to my analysis of what I could do in that space, I came up with the idea that it would be 9 screens and 4 monitors and 9 channels. The issue of the structure was really mainly based around the sound, because Michael's dances are very much music based. And so seeing them silent is only half of it. Given the nature of installations and gallery going, I've decided to make a 20-minute loop on 9 channels. And then I decided that there could be 2 pieces of sound at the same time. I had to decide which 40 minutes of sound to use. That was the first decision, and then where to put it. These are things that were originally conceived as single channel works for television. I've always wanted to, since I've started working in galleries and museums, I've always wanted to take my earlier work, which is single channel, and make it a walkthrough experience. The idea was that the spectator could wander around and just see a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and maybe put together an idea of the gestalt of the whole thing. An experienced dance audience usually feels like when they're watching live dance, there's a kinesthetic response that you have to, if you're in tune with it, to the dancing. So you kind of feel it in your body. When you make a film of that same thing, the challenge is how to make it vivid in 2 dimensions versus live 3 dimensions. So my process is I watch a dance, and then I try to watch myself watching and see what I see, and then try to translate that into a series of shots, like what takes my attention at any one time. If you have movement in the camera that amplifies the movement in the dance, or goes against it or with it, that also can help. Every artist stays the same and changes over a period of time. What first attracted me about Michael's work was he was like, we really started working together seriously when he was about 21. He was a rule breaker, wanted to break taboos, sort of. This went to every element of dancing, the costuming, the vocabulary, the way it related to ballet versus, let's say, ordinary movement. He always had a strong interest in music, so the music has always been a strong base of his work. And he's wanted to collaborate with people that's really amazing visual artists and musicians. At a certain point, around 1990, I think there was a big change in that he wanted to kind of strip away a lot of the elements that he had been using in the 80s. In the early days, the way Michael worked was we would be touring, and he would incorporate some new element into the old piece, and then it would sort of evolve, and eventually it would become a totally new piece. And that changed because the dance world changed. People used to book choreographers based on the choreography and their artistic vision. It changed to looking at individual pieces, and so people had to make pieces and then sell them, basically. So that affected his work also. He always comes up with something interesting. That's sort of my criteria for artistic work, is interestingness, not good versus bad, but how interesting it is. And Michael's work has always been interesting.